Hi, I'm April. I am a singer-songwriter and music teacher, and lately I've been totally obsessed with Lizzo's new record, Special. So I thought today it would be really fun to pick apart my favorite song on the record, which is called To Be Loved, Am I Ready? So in this video, we're gonna pick apart why this song is so special, and how we can write something just as catchy and upbeat and exciting as this one. Before we get into the technical songwriting stuff, can we just take a sec and look at this lyric?
He called me Melly, he squeezed my belly. I'm too embarrassed to say I like it.
I love this lyric for so many reasons, and I think the reason it stands out to me so much is that it really gets at the ethos of Lizzo as a figure and as a person. The message at the core of everything Lizzo does, from her social media to her music and even to interviews, is the idea that you should let yourself be loved. This lyric succinctly gets at exactly what it feels like to be nervous that you're not going to be understood or appreciated. And in an instant, we see exactly what happens when she challenges all of these preconceived notions about what it feels like or should feel like to be loved. This person she's with calls her by a silly nickname, and it's one that's based on her actual name as opposed to her stage name Lizzo. So it's clear that he's acknowledging her actual identity as opposed to the identity that she projects into the world. But he also squeezes her belly, which I just totally adore. Like, the belly is something that we're all kind of told to suck away and pretend isn't there. And I love that in this moment, she lets that be something joyful, that someone's acknowledging this part of her that people often tell her to get rid of or to hide. I think this is just an absolutely beautiful moment, and this sense of joy from her really does come through. So for me, that's part of what makes this song really special to begin with. When writing lyrics for a song, a great place to start is with the W's. Who, what, when, where, and why. These questions help to ground us in our story and start to get into the mindset of our main character so that we can know exactly what they would do or what they're going to do. In this song, we're starting with the word girl, which she totally fills with emotion. It's really clear she's about to just start unloading all of her boy problems on probably one of her best friends. She then references her massively popular song Truth Hurts, which tells us that she's not singing as a character, but is actually just singing from her own perspective. And we also see this with the lyric that I referenced before, using the name Melly. She tells us that she's in bed, which gives us the clue that it's either probably the morning or the night, and I'm gonna assume night just based on other context clues, and that a guy she likes is calling her. And the why, the reason that she's singing the song, is that she's not really sure if she's ready to accept love. Now, you don't necessarily have to include every single answer to every single one of these questions in your song, but it can be really useful for grounding both yourself and the listener in the world of your song. It can help you get into the mood of what's going on in the story, and it can help you get into the heads of your characters. In this song, Lizzo is able to give us answers to all of these questions right away in the first verse. And I think this is a big part of why it's so impactful. We know exactly where we are and who's speaking and who they're speaking to. And of course, she has a really good reason for singing in the first place. But Lizzo doesn't just stop at describing the scene. She also uses really clever wordplay. Specifically, she starts with the phrase, "I did the work, it didn't work." And if you look at this lyric and then compare it to some other lyrics that people often cite as clever, you might notice that a lot of them have something very specific in common: repetition and inversion. Repetition means to just duplicate something exactly, whereas inversion means to take an idea and flip it upside down to find the opposite. In each of these examples, you'll notice that there are repeated words, but that the second phrase inverts those words by either using a different meaning of the same word or by describing the opposite of the first phrase. In the case of this song, Lizzo is using the word work in two different ways. So this lyric could have been phrased as, "I tried to improve my life, but nothing happened." But obviously this lacks the kind of creative punch that she was looking for here. So if you want to come up with a clever lyric like this one, start with something really common, a phrase that you maybe use all the time or an idiom. For example, let's use the phrase "once in a blue moon," which means rarely or every once in a long while. The word blue has two meanings. It can either mean the color blue or to feel sad. So we could say something like, once in a blue moon, the moon makes me blue. By the way, quick side note, I talk about this and a lot of other really useful lyric writing tips in my new online course, Level Up Your Lyric Writing. So if you're interested in getting a little bit deeper into this, you can take the link in the description to either my Skillshare page or my Patreon. The last lyric topic that I wanted to talk about in this video is how internal rhyme and the difference between the rapped and sung sections of the song help to enhance the meaning of the message. When a song has a lot of quickly paced rhymes, especially rhymes that happen in the middle of a phrase, the song is giving us a hint that the narrator's energy level is up. The phrase, "that lovey-dovey was not a fan of it," seems to all fall in one line, but it has two sets of rhymes right in the middle, lovey-dovey and shit and it. More rhymes over a shorter amount of time keeps the flow moving quickly, and it gives us the impression that maybe the narrator has racing thoughts. There's also a clear distinction between the parts of this song that are rapped versus the parts that are sung. Throughout the verse, Lizzo is either rapping or singing on a one-note melody, which does a really great job of illustrating all of Lizzo's racing thoughts. You get the impression that she's ranting and pacing back and forth, or continues to sit there scrolling while giving her friends this big pros and cons list. But whenever she has a genuine emotional response, she starts to sing. So just as Bob Fosse said of musical theater, the time to sing is when your emotional level is just too high to speak anymore. The song has a total 80s vibe, from the synth line to the drums to the general Tina Turner-ness of the whole thing. And it also has a lot of elements of Max Martin's production style, as well as Lizzo's previous songs, especially the song Juice. The chord progression of To Be Loved looks like this. As you listen, you might notice that the chords are played with a little bit of syncopation, which just means putting the emphasis on a weak beat. So think about that one person who's always clapping off the beat from the rest of the crowd. Now, most of the time, you'll see the chords change right at the beginning of each measure, and sometimes on the third beat, because that's the second strongest beat of the measure. But in this song, you'll notice that the chord changes aren't spaced out as evenly. There's a little bit more of a rhythm to them. The chord changes often happen on weaker beats, like right here, where you'll notice the chord changes on the and of 3, and then again on the and of 4. These more rhythmic chord changes definitely give the song a catchier, more exciting vibe, but they also throw off our sense of rhythm right in the beginning of the song. Since the song starts on a pickup, and we don't have drums or a melody to anchor us, it's really hard to figure out where the beat is. When Lizzo's voice finally comes in, she is singing on the beat, but it kind of feels like she isn't, because we've been so disoriented by this part in the beginning. This feeling is also compounded by the chord progression itself, which is in the key of E minor, but starts on a C major chord. When you hear a C major chord right in the beginning of the song, it makes a lot of sense to assume that we're in C major. But that chord is immediately followed by a D major, which is not in the key of C, and then that one is super quickly followed by the tonic, that home chord of E minor. So since we've started somewhere that isn't the tonic, we automatically have this kind of unmoored feeling. We don't really feel tied to any one key, so the rest of the progression has to do the job of filling us in on everything that we're missing. The way this progression feels like it's constantly tumbling forward really contributes to that disorienting feeling in the beginning of the song. And I think this feeling mirrors the meaning of the song perfectly. She's confused about where to go, so we're just as confused as she is right off the bat. Once we kind of find our footing in that chord progression, things go pretty smoothly for a while. We get those rap sections in the verse, and then in the chorus, the bass finally comes in, and we get this big, boisterous, exciting energy boost.
Oh, 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 am I ready? Ain't no doubt, am I ready? What you talking about?
But once we've established this really awesome, exciting bass line that wasn't existent in our verse and is now all over the place in our chorus, how do we go back to being bassless? Well, the answer to this in this song is that we don't actually go back to being bassless, and we get rid of all of the really intricate bass playing by going totally silent right after the chorus. We get this tiny a cappella moment, and then right after that, we get a much more simplified, refined, simple bass line.
How am I supposed to love somebody else when I don't like myself? Like, ooh, guess I better learn to.
The addition of this simple bass line here also ever so slightly elevates what happened in the first verse, causing us to not get bored during that second verse. When we get to the bridge, the chord progression pretty much stays the same, so we don't really see any contrast there. But about halfway through, we do start to see something really different. In this moment, the drums totally drop out, everything else gets really low and quiet and sparse, and the rhythm is completely taken over by these little hand claps. This moment, of course, has that little bit of word painting when I clap back as she's literally clapping. But more importantly, this section is giving us a change in dynamics. It's kind of quieting everything else down and allowing us to focus on the message of the song in a really big way. And it's also not a coincidence that this is the part of the song that shifts lyrically as well. This is the first time in the entire song that she's speaking directly to him as opposed to her friends and the people around her. And this is an incredibly important spot to highlight as well, because this is the first time she acknowledges that she is ready. She finally answers her own question. And this revelation, this thing she's finally admitting to herself, that she is finally ready to accept this love from this other person, deserves its own special musical moment.
I was fed up with the fantasy. What you wanna do? Think I'm ready?
Hand claps like this are a really useful and fun technique to use in your own songs, and I would totally recommend playing with them, because when you get to a bridge, things should be contrasted, things should be a little bit different, because they're going to allow your listener to not get bored and used to what's been happening. Hand claps in particular give us something distinct and unusual and exciting, and they also allow everybody at a concert to clap along, except for that one guy. And now, for the moment we've all been waiting for, the modulation. A modulation is a key change. We're literally just going from one key into another key. And in pop music, it's typically a higher key. That way we get this extra jolt of energy right toward the end of the song, right when you've gotten used to everything else that's going on. They're super easy to pick out in pop songs because that's the moment when everything just explodes and gets super exciting and fun all of a sudden. These kinds of key changes have been really popular for a long time, but you've probably noticed them just after the bridge in all of those boy band and pop star anthems of the 90s. Any big show-offy belting songs by pop divas like Celine Dion and Whitney Houston, or like Every 10 Seconds in Love on Top by Beyonce. To do a direct modulation like this one, start by figuring out what key your chord progression is in. So let's try it with a chord progression in C. So here are all of the chords in C major, and I'm going to change it to D major, which is a whole step up. So now here are all of the chords in D major, and you'll notice that I've numbered them so that each one of these chords has a parallel in the new key. So to modulate your song, just replace each of your chords with the matching number in your new progression. So C becomes D, E minor becomes F sharp minor, and G becomes A. Personally, I'm a really big fan of breath in music. A lot of producers tend to take the breaths and all of those little mouth noises out from in between all of the lyrics in a song. This is why an artist like Katy Perry can be so hard to sing along to. Like, does this woman have the lung capacity of a whale? No. They just take out all of her breaths in order to make it sound like she's singing everything all at once. Taking the breath out of songs can be really great in pop music especially, for creating songs that feel cohesive and full and whole. When an artist doesn't have to breathe, it makes them feel literally invincible, Like, they're able to do stuff that we mere mortals cannot, which is really great for a pop star's image. It allows them to feel like they're on top of the world and powerful and big, because that's how they're supposed to be perceived. But taking all of the breaths out of a song can make it feel a little bit robotic or lifeless, which is why a lot of indie artists choose to leave their breaths in the song. The inclusion of breath can make an artist feel more relatable or human, even on a subconscious level. Now, of course, both of these options are totally valid. It just completely depends on the genre you're writing for, as well as the types of choices that you like to make as an artist. But even aside from breathing in between lines, sometimes breath can be used to really enhance the narrative of the story and to contribute to the musical landscape. There are, of course, really obvious on-the-nose examples of this, like in Radioactive by Imagine Dragons.
Breathing in the chemicals.
But then there are also more subtle ways to use breath. Take the song Girl by the Beatles. Right after the chorus in this song, we hear this sound that sounds like air being sucked in through his teeth.
Oh, girl.
Now, without having to say another word, we immediately know how this narrator is feeling. This is the type of sound you make when something is really uncomfortable, but you like it. Like when you're about to get into a really hot tub and you're like... So we can all picture this beautiful woman walking by and his kind of lusty heartache when he realizes that she's going past and he can't reach out to her or speak to her. In this song, Lizzo uses breath really similarly, especially in the intro and in the verses. One of the first sounds we hear in the whole song is this big gasp.
Girl, I'm about to have a panic attack.
And this moment is sort of similar to the Imagine Dragons song. It's pretty clear what she's going for here, and she wants to surprise us as well, so we get this little bit of when we hear her gasp. But then as we get to the verse, we start to hear these little panting noises, and these are a little bit harder to pin down.
It didn't work. That truth, it hurts. That damn, it hurts.
Like, is she panting because she's moving too quickly? Or maybe it's kind of illustrating her racing thoughts? Or is this sound happening because she's near something that's too hot to touch? Like she's getting a little bit closer and closer to something that could ultimately burn her. Now that we've talked a little bit about breath sounds, go through the song and see if you can find any spots that don't have a melody. Aside from the very beginning of the introduction, you'll notice that there's literally always something happening. It's either mouth noises or a little bit of laughter or backing vocals, but there's always something going on. This is a common choice in pop music because it keeps things going. We never get bored waiting for the next lyric or melody because there's always some new piece of ear candy that comes in to keep us engaged. In the case of this song, a big focal point is the backing vocals. And there are tons of different reasons why you might use backing vocals in your song. It can fill up some of that empty space, it can emphasize something really important that you want to say, they can even work to make your song feel like a sing-along. But in this song in particular, the backing vocals are being used as a Greek chorus. One of the most familiar and easy to recognize examples of a Greek chorus in modern media is in the movie Hercules by Disney, in which the backing vocals are literally a Greek chorus. In both this example and in To Be Loved, the backing vocalists are interacting with the edges of the story, and they're generally just there for encouragement, even if their actions don't have any influence over the story. As humans, we have emotional and physical responses to certain sounds. For instance, if you play a cluster of low notes on a piano and then ask the listener what kind of animal it reminds them of, they're generally going to say something like an elephant or a rhinoceros. Whereas if you play a bunch of really quickly paced high notes on a piano, the listener is more likely to say something like a bumblebee or a mouse. These sorts of associations exist in melody as well. For instance, if a melody is moving from low to high, a listener is likely to say that it's building in anticipation, that it feels like we're moving somewhere or we're heading upward on a journey. Whereas if the melody is moving down, the listener is much more likely to experience a sense of deflation or a feeling of groundedness. which is why we as songwriters get the exciting job of getting to match our melodies with our lyrics. We get to decide whether we're going to fulfill those audience expectations. In a sense, by writing a melody, we're telling our listener how to feel. In the case of this song, most of the verse is static. It's all sung on one note and sort of rapped.
I did the work, it didn't work. That truth, it hurts. That damn, it hurts.
This gives the story a static feel, like we're sort of jogging in place. The first time we hear singing in an actual melody, it looks like this.
I'm good with my friends. I don't want a man, girl.
The lowering of the melody here does a lot to reveal the subtext in what she's saying. That she's fine, she's okay, everything's good. Because I have a sneaking suspicion that if this melody went up rather than down, we might actually believe her. But since this melody lowers and then repeats, it gives me the sense that she's digging herself further and further into this lie. A lie that's further exposed when we see this blue note or this accidental that's not in the key. The next time we hear her sing is in the chorus, and here she sings the exact same words on 3 different melodies. Repeating a phrase always means that that phrase is important, but when she repeats it in a bunch of different contexts, it gives us the sense that she doesn't really know how to feel about these words. The first time it feels like she's whispering the words, really unsure about what she's saying. And then the second time it feels like she's surprised herself, and now she's like, oh my god, am I ready? And the third time she's a little bit more grounded. Am I ready? Now this constant emotional and melodic movement would sound really all over the place and crazy and wild if not for the backing vocals. In this section, the backing vocals are here to keep Lizzo grounded. They're helping her to stay in one static place by singing something simple and that doesn't have a lot of melodic movement. It almost feels like they're trying to pull her melody up and then pull it back down when she gets a little bit too high. And at the end of the chorus, we finally hear the full question. Am I ready to be loved? And in this moment especially, I want you to pay attention to the way that the chords and the melody are interacting. Remember that this song is in E minor. So what that really means is that in order to feel stable and home and like everything's good, we want the chord E minor to happen at the same time as the note E. And that's gonna make us feel like everything's good, it's done, we're home, we're comfy. Now at the end of this chorus, you might notice that the chord E minor does play, but just for a sec, and then right after it's done playing, we finally hear the note E, but they don't happen at the same time, which makes us feel a little bit unstable, like the story isn't resolved yet. So because of this, we never really feel at home, which is perfect for a song about instability. It's a song about how unsure she is. But as we talked about earlier, the bridge of the song does something different. She finally admits what's been weighing on her, that she is ready to be loved. So at the end of the song, we have this brand new sense of clarity. And when we hear that phrase, I don't know why, but I'm ready, the melody finally drops down to our home note. And just when that chord progression is about to get to that home chord, right at the end of the song, the music cuts out. At this moment, the musical ground is yanked out from under us, so we never actually get to hear the synth playing that final home chord at the very end. But the song resolves anyway, all thanks to that one last backing vocalist singing the third up from Lizzo's voice and cementing our chord in F sharp minor. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it interesting or enlightening or helpful in some capacity. And if you did, be sure to let me know in the comments below. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, ring that little bell to be notified the next time I post. You can also go check out my online course, Level Up Your Lyric Writing, on either Skillshare or my Patreon. Links are in the description, and I will see you soon.